win for Elon Musk and Doge, who are wasting no time in their efforts to overhaul the federal government, as a federal judge ruled Doge can keep its access to data at the Department of Labor and other agencies, rejecting labor unions' attempt to shut down that access. But a judge has barred Musk and Doge from accessing Treasury data for now. Joining us now, CNN senior legal analyst and former state and federal prosecutor, Ali Honig, and CNN senior political analyst, Ron Brownstein. Ali, I want to start with you. Elon and Doge, they are temporarily blocked from accessing this Treasury data. Do you think that the judge will make this hold permanent?
Well, Paula, there has been a bit of a sea change happening over the last several days, which is this. In the beginning, virtually all of these lawsuits challenging Donald Trump's efforts and Elon Musk's efforts to downsize the government were successful. Basically, all of the courts to hear these cases at least put temporary holds on the Trump administration. But slowly, including over the last 2-3 days, we've seen some of those holds come off. We've seen courts start to rule in favor, in some cases, of Trump and Elon Musk. And the reason, broadly speaking, is it's not the case that federal employees have some sacrosanct perpetual right to remain employed forever. And it's also not the case that Elon Musk has zero ability to access information. If he's been someone who's appointed by the president to do a certain job with certain restraints, he can access certain information. So we're starting to see the tide turn right now. A judge, for example, has declined to put the buyout plan on hold. Another judge just yesterday, a Democratic appointed judge, Judge Reyes, forcefully rejected an effort by the fired inspectors general to get their jobs back. So it's not quite as simple as, well, these people are entitled to jobs and they do good work. And I think more and more the courts are slowly coming around to Donald Trump's position on these cases.
You know, Ron, I think what's interesting about the access to Treasury data is this has people worked up, right? Because this is also how federal employees are paid, Social Security, disability. Musk and Trump don't really seem moved by court losses necessarily. But do you think that if constituents and the populace gets too worked up about this, do you think political pressure might prompt them to reverse course on this?
Well, I think, the Treasury data also implicates people's privacy. And the question of whether, Musk and his minions, the people he's brought in, often in the case, very young coders, are going to have access to Americans' personal, financial, and maybe health data is, I think, a different political question than the size of the federal workforce. I'm not sure that the public broadly is going to be that unsympathetic to the idea of trimming the federal workforce. Where I think Musk and Trump run into risk on that front is whether this is going to threaten basic services. And, if you start severely cutting the federal workforce, Paula, you are really hostage to events. I mean, you cut CDC and there are outbreaks of infectious disease among kids, you're going to have some political blowback. Or you cut food inspection and there are outbreaks of E. coli and other problems. You're going to have blowback. So I'm not sure there's going to be a huge political uprising at the front end, but I think that once you do this, you leave yourself pretty vulnerable to events on the back end.
Ellie, I want to get your take on what's happening. Talk about an uprising over at DOJ, where there's basically a civil war going on inside that building. You've worked at the Justice Department. Obviously, we have the mutiny over dropping the Adams case, tensions over investigations that have happened over the past few years. Attorney General Bondi, she's like 10 days into the job. Presumably Todd Blanche will be confirmed soon. Do you think there's any way that they can gain back the trust inside the building, or is it just lost at this point?
I don't think there's any way they can ever completely win back the trust that's been squandered in the last 2-3 days. First of all, I don't know where Pam Bondi is here. She's sort of floating in and out of various news conferences and seems not to even know what's happening in her own department. Meanwhile, Emil Bove is wreaking absolute havoc. He's firing people. He's firing off letters that become public in which he says directly it's okay to dismiss a case if it furthers the president's political agenda. This is outrageous stuff. This undermines DOJ's independence. This undermines DOJ's credibility. I know for a fact you don't have to be too close to DOJ to be able to tell people are in an uprising there, and that's the people who have come up and quit and issued sort of eloquent public statements to explain why they're quitting, but it also goes to the hundreds and thousands of rank and file people who work there. The last week has wrought incalculable damage on DOJ. What Pam Bondi needs to do is get control of her own house. She needs to set the priorities of this place. Todd Blanche does too, and not let Emil Bove sort of run the shop on his own, because he's doing a horrific job of that and he's doing real damage.
Yeah, Emil Bove, his name has been on the memos, right? The termination memos that were pushing for information about people who worked on January 6th. Obviously, he's had to handle what's going on with the Adams case. Ron, do you think Bondi should push him out, make him sort of the scapegoat for everything that has happened, and try to start again? Do you think that would help?
I can't see that happening. I mean, you can see the attraction of trying to, finger someone as the scapegoat, but really what he is doing is advancing the vision that Donald Trump has explicitly laid out, where the Justice Department is more kind of a person is drafted or enlisted or coerced into being an enforcer, punishing his enemies and rewarding his friends. I mean, the bookend of dropping these charges against Adams, which in any rational world, given the letters from the line prosecutor, from the assistant U.S. attorney in New York, both of whom with impeccable conservative credentials, that this was a response to a quid pro quo offer from the mayor's defense. In any rational world, you would have Congress investigating, and maybe the judge himself will be asking some pointed questions when he hears, the request to dismiss. But basically, what you're seeing, I think this case crystallizes, is how far Trump wants to go in transforming the administration of justice into a tool to advance his interests. And really across a broad, swath of society, I think from business leaders to Congress to civic leaders, people have to decide whether they are comfortable living in that world, because it could come around and bite you in ways that you might not anticipate today. But I think the Adams case really crystallizes those choices, and maybe in a way that will be easier for the public to grasp than some of the other decisions, like the abandoning, for example, enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Yeah, bitten by his own hand-picked acting U.S. attorney. Ellie Honig, Ron Brownstein, thank you so much for joining us.